"Mom, do we have enough for today?" The words were so quiet they weren't meant to be heard, but the man standing nearby heard every syllable. And in that exact moment, his life split into two parts. Before that question, and everything that came after, it was just a bus stop, just another cold morning, just another family trying to survive. But one small question asked by a child with trembling hands was about to uncover a truth no one there was ready for. And the decision that man made next would not only change her future, it would force him to face a past he had spent years running from. Stay with this story until the end. The smallest moment leads to the biggest choice. The cold that morning wasn't dramatic. No snowstorm, no howling wind, just the kind of quiet, bone-deep chill that settles into your clothes and stays there. The bus stop sat at the edge of a tired strip mall, the kind with flickering signs and half-empty storefronts. A metal bench, a dented trash can, a schedule taped to the glass that everyone pretended still mattered. Caleb Thornwell stood a few steps away, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn coat, staring at nothing in particular. 43 years old, divorced, alone. He had learned long ago how to disappear into public spaces without being noticed. That's when he heard the voice. It was barely above a whisper. "Mom, do we have enough for today?" Caleb didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. He already knew that tone. He glanced sideways. A woman stood near the bench, no older than her early 30s. Her coat was thin for the weather sleeves, slightly frayed at the cuffs. She held a paper cup of coffee with both hands as if it were the only warm thing left in the world. Beside her was a little girl, maybe 6. Small for her age. Dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. A faded backpack clutched to her chest like armor. The woman swallowed, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We will be okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "We always are." The little girl nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. That question, "Do we have enough?" he had asked it once too. Not out loud, but he had thought it every morning as a kid. Enough food, enough heat. Enough time before something else went wrong. He shifted his weight, debating with himself. It is none of your business, he thought. People don't want strangers stepping in. Still, he couldn't stop watching. The bus was late. Of course it was. Minutes dragged by. The little girl rubbed her hands together, breath fogging the air. The woman noticed and pulled the child closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, trying to shield her from the cold with her own body. That did it. Caleb walked toward the nearby coffee cart without thinking it through. He ordered 2 hot chocolates and a breakfast sandwich, paid in cash, and carried them back like they weighed nothing. When he stopped in front of them, the woman stiffened instantly. "I am sorry," Caleb said quickly, keeping his voice low calm. "I didn't mean to startle you." She looked at the food, then at him, her face flushing with embarrassment. "We are fine," she said. "Really, you don't have to." "I know," he replied. "I just thought it might help." The little girl stared at the cup in his hand, eyes wide. She didn't reach for it, didn't say a word. The woman hesitated, pride and exhaustion warring in her expression. "I can't take this," she finally said. "I don't even know you." Caleb nodded. "That is fair." He set the bag gently on the bench anyway. "When I was her age," he said, nodding toward the girl, "there were mornings when a hot meal meant the difference between making it through the day or not." The woman's jaw tightened. She looked away. "My name is Caleb," he added, "and I am not here to fix anything, just to help you get through the morning." Silence stretched between them. Finally, the woman exhaled, shoulders sagging just a little. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name is Lena, and this is Ivy." Ivy looked up at him then. Really looked. "Thank you, sir," she said, clutching the cup with both hands like it was something precious. Caleb smiled before he could stop himself. "You are welcome, kiddo." The bus pulled up moments later with a tired hiss of air brakes. Lena gathered their things quickly, avoiding his eyes, still unsure if accepting help had been the right thing to do. As Ivy stepped onto the bus, she moved slower than expected. Just for a second. Just enough for Caleb to notice. Her right foot dragged barely, but it was there. Caleb's smile faded. And in that moment, standing in the cold beside an ordinary bus stop, he had no idea that overhearing one quiet question had just set something irreversible in motion. The bus doors folded shut with a tired hiss, and for a brief moment, Caleb Thornwell thought that was the end of it. Another small kindness. Another morning he would never see again. He stood there, hands still in his pockets, watching the bus pull away as it merged into traffic. The cold crept back in immediately, filling the space the warmth had left. He told himself to move on, and he almost did, but something about the way Ivy had stepped onto that bus wouldn't let go of him. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry. She didn't stumble. She simply favored one leg just enough to be noticed by someone who knew what to look for. Caleb had spent years noticing small things most people missed. It was a habit he never quite shook. He turned away from the bus stop and headed toward his truck, but his mind stayed behind, replaying the image over and over. Maybe she is just tired, he told himself. Kids limp all the time. Still, the tight feeling in his chest refused to loosen. The next morning, Caleb found himself back at the same bus stop. He didn't tell himself why. He arrived early, pretending it was coincidence, leaning against his truck with a cup of coffee he barely touched. He scanned the street, half expecting not to see them at all, but then he did. Lena and Ivy approached from down the sidewalk, bundled against the cold. Ivy walked close to her mother, fingers wrapped around the strap of her backpack. Caleb watched carefully this time. At first, everything looked normal. Ivy chatted quietly, pointing at something across the street. Lena nodded, listening, smiling when she could. Then Ivy took a few quicker steps to keep up. And there it was again, that subtle drag, that fraction of hesitation before putting weight down. Caleb's stomach dropped. He stepped forward without thinking. "Morning," he said gently. Lena looked up, surprised. For a second, uncertainty flashed across her face, then recognition. "Oh, hi," she said. "We didn't expect to see you again." Neither did I," Caleb admitted. "I drive past here most mornings." That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't a lie either. Ivy smiled when she saw him. "Hi, sir," she said. Caleb smiled back, but his eyes stayed on her legs. "How's your foot?" he asked casually, keeping his tone light. Lena stiffened instantly. What she said too quickly. "Her foot's fine." Caleb raised his hand slightly. "Sorry, I just thought I noticed." "She's just clumsy," Lena interrupted, forcing a laugh. "Always has been." Ivy glanced up at her mother, then back at Caleb. She didn't say anything. That silence spoke louder than words. The bus arrived, interrupting the moment. Lena ushered Ivy forward, clearly eager to end the conversation. Caleb followed them onto the bus without quite realizing he'd decided to. They sat near the front. Caleb took a seat across the aisle, leaving space, pretending to stare out the window. The bus lurched forward, rattling along its familiar route. A few minutes passed in silence. Then Ivy shifted in her seat, wincing slightly as she adjusted her leg. Caleb couldn't ignore it anymore. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. Lena shot him a warning look. "She's fine." Ivy hesitated. "A little," she admitted. Lena's face fell. "Sweetheart," she said, voice tight. "We talked about this." "I know," Ivy whispered, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry." Caleb felt something twist sharply inside him. "I didn't mean to pry," he said quickly. "You don't owe me anything." Lena stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "It's nothing," she said. "She just gets tired." The lie hung in the air, thin and fragile. Caleb waited. People always rushed moments like this. He didn't. After a long pause, Lena finally spoke again. "She's been complaining about it for a while," she said quietly. "I thought it was growing pains. Kids get those, right?" Caleb nodded slowly. "Sometimes." But then it didn't go away, she continued. And then she started walking like that. Ivy leaned against her mother's small fingers, gripping the fabric of her coat. "I didn't want to worry her," Lena said, voice cracking. "She already worries about too much." Caleb glanced at Ivy, who was staring at the floor, expression far too serious for a child her age. "How long?" he asked. Lena swallowed. "A few months." Caleb's heart sank. "And you haven't," she shook her head, tears welling despite her effort to hold them back. "I don't have insurance," she whispered. "I work nights at a diner, no benefits, no savings, and every time I thought about taking her to a doctor, all I could see was a bill I'd never be able to pay." Her voice trembled now. "I kept telling myself it would pass, that I just needed a little more time." Ivy looked up at her then. "It's okay, Mom," she said quickly. "I can handle it." Those words broke something in Caleb. No child should ever have to say that. The bus came to a stop. Lena stood abruptly, pulling Ivy up with her. "This is our stop," she said, avoiding his eyes. Caleb stood too. "Lena," he said gently, "please." She hesitated, hand gripping the pole. "I can't do this," she said, shaking her head. "I can't accept more help. You don't even know us." Caleb took a breath. "I know what it's like," he said quietly, "to wait too long because you're afraid of what help might cost." She froze. When I was a kid, he continued, my mom ignored a pain she couldn't afford to look into. By the time she couldn't ignore it anymore, it was too late. Lena turned toward him, eyes wide. She didn't make it, Caleb said simply. The bus doors opened. I'm not saying that's what this is, he added quickly. I'm just saying some things are worth knowing sooner. Lena stood there, trembling, torn between fear and instinct. I don't want pity, she whispered. This isn't pity, Caleb replied. It's concern. The bus driver cleared his throat impatiently. Lena exhaled shakily. I don't even know your last name, she said. Caleb met her gaze. It's Thornwell, and I'm not going anywhere. Ivy tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. Mom, she whispered, my leg really does hurt. Lena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something in her expression had shifted. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. They stepped off the bus together. The cold air hit them immediately, but none of them seemed to notice. Lena crouched down in front of Ivy, brushing her hair back. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner, she said, tears spilling freely now. I thought I was protecting you. Ivy wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. It's okay, she said softly. I know you tried. Caleb turned away, giving them privacy, his throat tight. In that moment, he understood something with painful clarity. Helping them yesterday had been a choice. Helping them now wasn't. This wasn't about kindness anymore. It was about not looking away when it mattered most. And as he stood there on the cracked pavement beside an ordinary bus stop, Caleb Thornwell realized his life was about to change whether he was ready for it or not. Before we go deeper into the story, there will be situations involving children, family, loss, and personal responsibility. This content is intended to remind listeners of the importance of presence, compassion, and the choices that can change an entire life. If you are not ready for these emotions, please consider pausing before continuing. The clinic sat between a pawn shop and a payday loan office, its faded sign buzzing softly like it was barely holding on. Lena hesitated at the door. I don't think this is a good idea, she said for the third time, fingers twisting the strap of her purse. I shouldn't have agreed to this. Caleb didn't push. He never did. We can leave, he said calmly. Right now. Ivy looked up at her mother, eyes wide. But, Mom, she whispered, you said the doctor might help. Lena closed her eyes. That was the problem. Hope was dangerous. The receptionist glanced up and offered a tired smile. Whitmore. Lena flinched, then nodded, yes. They followed her down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old carpet. Ivy's steps echoed softly, unevenly against the linoleum floor. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. The exam room was small but clean. A paper-covered table, a rolling stool, a poster of the human skeleton peeling slightly at the corners. The doctor entered moments later. Dr. Rowan Hale was in his early 50s, calm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who spoke slowly even when time was short. Hello, he said, kneeling slightly to Ivy's level. I'm Dr. Hale, and you must be Ivy. She nodded shyly. Mind if I take a look at that leg? Ivy glanced at her mother. Lena nodded, though her face was pale. The exam started gently. Reflexes. Range of motion. Simple questions. Does this hurt? A little. And this more. Dr. Hale's expression didn't change, but his silence grew heavier. He asked Ivy to walk across the room. Halfway there, her gait faltered. The doctor straightened slowly. How long has this been happening? He asked Lena. Lena swallowed hard. Months. And pain. Yes. Worsening, yes. Dr. Hale sighed quietly and rolled his stool closer. I don't want to alarm you, he said carefully, but this isn't something I'd call routine. Lena's hands trembled in her lap. What does that mean? She asked. It means we need imaging, he replied. X-rays at the very least, possibly an MRI. Caleb felt the room tighten, and after that, Lena whispered. Dr. Hale paused. Depending on what we find, he said we could be looking at long-term treatment, physical therapy, medication, regular follow-ups. How long? She asked. Years, he said honestly. Maybe 2, maybe more. The word landed like a weight on her chest. And the cost, she asked, though her voice already knew the answer. Dr. Hale hesitated again. That pause was worse than any number. It adds up, he said, especially without insurance. Lena nodded slowly, eyes shining with unshed tears. Thank you, she said, already standing. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Caleb stood too. Doctor, he said quietly, what happens if she doesn't get treatment? Dr. Hale looked at Ivy, then back at Caleb. Her mobility could worsen, he said. Pain could become constant. There's a risk of permanent damage. Lena pressed her hand to her mouth. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't. Caleb felt the old memory rise up, his mother sitting at the kitchen table. Unpaid bills spread out like accusations telling him it would be fine. It hadn't been, Dr. Caleb said again, voice steady despite the storm inside him. What's the next step? Dr. Hale studied him for a long moment. If you're asking medically, he said, we start now, as soon as possible. And financially, Caleb asked. The doctor exhaled. That's usually where families get stuck. Caleb nodded once. Schedule the imaging, he said. Today. Lena spun toward him. No, she said sharply. You don't get to do that. Caleb met her gaze. I'm not asking permission, he said gently. I'm offering help. I won't let you, she said, voice breaking. I won't turn my child into a charity case. Dr. Hale cleared his throat and quietly stepped toward the door. I'll give you a moment, he said. The door closed. Silence flooded the room. I can't owe you this, Lena said, tears finally spilling over. You don't know what you're offering. This isn't coffee and sandwiches. Caleb took a breath. You're right, he said. It's not. He moved slowly, careful not to crowd her. When I was 7, my mom started getting headaches. She said it was stress. She worked 2 jobs, no insurance, no time. Lena stared at him, frozen. She didn't want help, he continued. Didn't want pity. Didn't want to owe anyone. His voice tightened, and by the time she couldn't ignore it anymore, it was too late. Lena shook her head. I'm sorry. I don't want your sympathy, Caleb said. I want you to hear me. Ivy watched them silently, clutching her backpack. I would give everything I have, Caleb said, to go back and make a different choice for my mom. He looked directly at Lena. This is my chance to make that choice now. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. I'm scared, she whispered. What if I let you do this and you disappear? What if she gets attached and then I won't? Caleb said firmly. She looked up. You don't know that. I do, he replied, because I know what it costs to walk away. The door opened gently. Dr. Hale stepped back in. Should I schedule the imaging? He asked quietly. Lena looked at Ivy. Her daughter met her gaze, eyes brave and tired and far too old for her age. Mom, Ivy said softly, I want to run again. That did it. Lena collapsed into the chair, sobbing. Yes, she said. Yes, please. Dr. Hale nodded. We'll start today. Caleb reached into his wallet and pulled out his card, placing it on the counter without ceremony. I'll handle the billing, he said. All of it. Lena looked at him through tears. I don't know how to thank you. Caleb shook his head. Don't, he said. Just let her get better. As they left the clinic hours later, Ivy leaned heavily against her mother, exhausted from tests and fear. Caleb walked beside them, quiet. This wasn't a good deed anymore. It was a commitment, and once made, there was no turning back. Because some choices don't just change a day, they change the shape of a life. The first therapy session did not look like hope. It looked like a small room with rubber mats on the floor, a wall mirror smudged with fingerprints, and a little girl biting her lip so hard it nearly bled. Ivy sat on the edge of the padded table legs, dangling sneakers neatly placed beside her. The therapist, a woman named Marla with kind eyes and a firm voice, knelt in front of her. Okay, Ivy, Marla said gently. We're just going to start with something easy. Ivy nodded. Lena sat in the chair against the wall, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Caleb stood near the door, arms folded, silent, trying to look like he belonged there. Does this hurt, Marla? Asked slowly, guiding Ivy's leg. Ivy hesitated. A little, she admitted. Lena flinched as if the pain had struck her instead. That's normal, Marla said. Your muscles are weak and your joints are stiff. We'll take it slow. They didn't take it slow enough for Ivy's liking. By the time the session ended, tears streamed quietly down her face. She never screamed, never begged to stop. She just endured, jaw-clenched, breathing, shallow eyes fixed on the ceiling. Caleb watched every second. He had seen grown men cry louder than that. The drive home was quiet. Ivy slept in the back seat, head tilted against the window, exhaustion written into every line of her small body. Lena stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly as if afraid that if she let herself really look at her daughter, she might break. This is my fault, she whispered suddenly. Caleb didn't respond right away. No, he said finally, it isn't. I waited too long, she said. I knew something wasn't right and I still waited. You waited because you were scared, Caleb replied. That doesn't make you a bad mother. Lena shook her head, tears spilling freely now. It feels like it does. Caleb pulled the truck over. He turned off the engine. I need you to hear this, he said quietly. The only reason this feels unbearable is because you love her, and that's the part that matters. Lena pressed her hand to her mouth, nodding, unable to speak. In the back seat, Ivy stirred, slightly murmuring something in her sleep. Caleb glanced at her and felt something shift, subtle, unfamiliar, and terrifying. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Therapy twice a week. Doctor visits once a month. Daily exercises at home that Ivy hated but did anyway. Some days were better, some days were brutal. There were mornings when Ivy couldn't put weight on her leg without wincing. Evenings when she collapsed into tears halfway through her exercises, apologizing between sobs for being bad at getting better. Lena learned how to encourage without pushing. Caleb learned when to step in and when to step back. He started bringing small things. Not toys, not gifts that felt too big, just quiet comforts. A soft blanket for the clinic waiting room. A pair of socks with little stars on them. A milkshake after a particularly hard session. Ivy began to look for him when she walked into therapy. You came, she said one afternoon, relief lighting her face. Wouldn't miss it, Caleb replied. Lena noticed. She didn't comment. But something in her expression changed, wary, grateful, afraid. One afternoon, as Ivy struggled through a set of stretches, her leg trembling with effort, Marla stopped her. That's enough for today, she said. Ivy looked up confused. But I didn't finish. You did, Marla said firmly. You listened to your body. That's part of getting stronger. Ivy nodded, slowly absorbing the idea. Caleb caught Lena watching their daughter with an expression that was equal parts pride and grief. She's so brave, Lena whispered. Caleb nodded. She is. Lena swallowed. She shouldn't have to be. That night, after Ivy had fallen asleep on the couch, Caleb stayed longer than usual. They sat at opposite ends of the room, the TV on mute, the house quiet. I don't want her to get attached to you, Lena said suddenly. Caleb didn't pretend he hadn't heard. I understand, he said. No, she replied, shaking her head. I don't think you do. She finally looked at him. Her father left when she was 2, she continued. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Caleb felt the words land heavily. She asked about him for years, Lena said. Every time a man showed up in our lives, teachers, neighbors, even co-workers, she'd get hopeful. And every time they'd leave. She exhaled shakily. I can't watch that happen again. Caleb chose his words carefully. I'm not trying to replace anyone, he said. And I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. Then why are you here? Lena asked, voice breaking. Caleb looked down at his hands. Because once you see someone hurting, he said quietly, and you walk away, that stays with you. Silence settled between them. I won't disappear, he added. I can promise you that much. Lena didn't respond, but she didn't ask him to leave either. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. Ivy had been progressing slowly, painfully. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That day, the pain was worse than usual. She collapsed halfway through her exercises, sobbing into Lena's arms. I don't want to do this anymore, she cried. It hurts too much. Lena's resolve cracked. We can stop for today, she said quickly. We don't have to push. Marla shook her head gently. She needs to finish 1 more set. No, Lena snapped. You don't understand. I do, Marla said. But stopping now teaches her something she doesn't need to learn. Lena looked to Caleb, a panic in her eyes. He hesitated. Then he knelt in front of Ivy. Hey, he said softly. Remember when you told me you wanted to run again? Ivy nodded through tears. This is how he said. Not all at once. Just this one part. She stared at him, breathing hard. I'll do it with you, he added. He sat down on the mat and mirrored the movement, awkwardly lifting his own leg. Ivy laughed, despite herself. Wrong leg, she said weakly. Figures, Caleb replied. With shaking determination, Ivy finished the set. When it was over, she collapsed against Caleb, sobbing into his jacket. He didn't move. Lena watched them, heart pounding. Something inside her shifted that day. Not all progress looked dramatic. Some days, success meant Ivy walking to the mailbox without stopping. Some days, it meant fewer tears. But one afternoon, without warning, Ivy took 3 running steps across the living room. 3. She froze, eyes wide, as if afraid to breathe. Mom, she whispered. Did you see that? Lena's hand flew to her mouth. I did, she said, voice trembling. I saw it. Caleb smiled slowly. You ran, he said. Ivy laughed a full, unrestrained laugh that filled the room. For the first time in months, the future felt possible. That night, as Ivy slept curled between her stuffed animals, Lena sat at the kitchen table staring at the bills she no longer opened. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee. I found a job posting, Lena said quietly. Day shift. Better hours. Still not great pay, but it's something. That's good, Caleb replied. I wouldn't even be looking if it weren't for you, she added. Caleb met her gaze. You're doing the work, he said. I'm just around. She nodded slowly. Caleb, she said, hesitating, I don't know what this is, but I need to know one thing. What's that? If this ever becomes too much for you, she said, voice barely above a whisper, tell me. Don't just disappear. Caleb felt the weight of the request settle into his bones. I won't, he said. I promise. She believed him. That scared her almost as much as it comforted her. Weeks later, during a follow-up appointment, Dr. Hale studied the latest scans, brow furrowed. Then he smiled. This is good, he said. Very good. Lena's breath caught. The treatment is working, he continued. She's responding better than expected. Ivy beamed. Does that mean I can run more? She asked. Dr. Hale chuckled, slowly. Ivy pumped her fist. As they left the clinic, Ivy skipped ahead, then stopped abruptly, glancing back. Caleb, she called. Yes, kiddo. She hesitated, then smiled shyly. Thank you for not leaving. The words hit him harder than any diagnosis ever could. Caleb stood there, rain misting the pavement around them, understanding something with perfect clarity. This wasn't just about helping someone heal. It was about choosing to stay, even when staying meant risking everything. And without realizing it, they were no longer walking separate paths. They were walking together. It happened on an ordinary evening. No raised voices. No dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet moment that cracked open everything they'd been carefully avoiding. Ivy had fallen asleep early that night, her body worn out from therapy and homework. She lay curled beneath her blanket, one arm wrapped around her stuffed rabbit, breathing slow and steady. The apartment was dim, the only light coming from the small lamp above the kitchen sink. Lena stood there rinsing dishes she'd already cleaned, once her thoughts circling the same fear she'd been pushing down for weeks. Caleb sat at the table, scrolling idly through his phone, waiting. You don't have to stay, Lena said suddenly, her back still turned. Caleb looked up. I know. She nodded, swallowing. You've been here a lot lately. He didn't argue. I don't want Ivy to think. Her voice trailed off. Caleb set his phone down slowly, to think what he asked. Lena turned to face him. Her eyes were tired, rimmed red, but there was something sharper beneath the exhaustion, fear raw and unguarded. To think that this is permanent, she said. When it might not be. The words landed hard. Caleb felt his chest tighten. I never told her anything like that, he replied carefully. I know, Lena said quickly. That's not what I mean. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. She's already calling you when something hurts, Lena continued. She looks for you when she walks into therapy. She talks about you at school. Caleb stayed silent. That scares me, Lena admitted. Because if you ever leave. I'm not planning to. He interrupted gently. That's what her father said. Lena snapped the words escaping before she could stop them. The room went still. Caleb flinched, not in anger, but recognition. I didn't mean. Lena started, tears welling. I'm sorry. Caleb stood, moving slowly, deliberately. You don't owe me an apology, he said. You're protecting your kid. She let out a shaky breath. I can't watch her get hurt again, Lena said. I barely survived it the first time. Caleb leaned against the counter, grounding himself. Tell me what you're afraid of, he said quietly. Lena hesitated. Then everything spilled out. He left when she was 2, she said. No warning, no explanation. He promised he'd come back. He never did. Her voice cracked. She waited by the window for weeks. Every time a car slowed down, she thought it was him. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. I told her he was busy, Lena continued, that he loved her, that he'd be back soon. She laughed bitterly. I lied to my own child because the truth felt too cruel. Silence stretched between them. I can't let that happen again, Lena said. I won't. Caleb nodded slowly. I understand that fear more than you think, he said. She looked up, startled. When I was engaged, he continued choosing each word with care. I thought I had my life figured out. Lena's brows furrowed, engaged. Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Her name was Mara, he said. We'd been together 5 years, wedding planned, invitation sent. Lena listened unmoving. 3 days before the wedding, he went on, I came home to an empty apartment. Her eyes widened. No note, no call, just gone. Caleb's voice stayed even, but something dark moved beneath it. I spent weeks trying to find her, calling, showing up at places I thought she might be. I thought something terrible had happened, and Lena whispered, and then I found out she'd moved in with someone else, he said simply. She'd been seeing him for months. Lena felt a sharp ache in her chest. She didn't even have the decency to tell me herself, Caleb added. I heard it from a friend. He looked down at his hands. That was the moment I learned how easy it is for someone to disappear from your life, he said. How little control you actually have. Lena swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she said softly. Caleb shrugged, but it wasn't casual. After that, he continued, I decided I wouldn't let anyone get close enough to hurt me like that again. She nodded slowly. Until us, she asked. Caleb met her gaze. Until Ivy, he said. The honesty of it took her breath away. She didn't do anything special, he added quickly. She just trusted me. Lena looked toward the hallway where Ivy slept. That kind of trust is dangerous, she said. Caleb nodded. It is. They stood there, 2 adults shaped by abandonment, staring at the same invisible scar from opposite sides. I don't want to promise you something I can't guarantee, Caleb said finally. I can't say I'll never disappoint you, or that I'll never mess up. Lena's heart pounded. But I can tell you this, he continued. I won't vanish. If something changes, you'll hear it from me. Face to face. She searched his expression for cracks. Found none. I need time, she said quietly. That's fair, Caleb replied. She hesitated, then asked the question she'd been avoiding. Why do you stay? Caleb didn't answer right away. When I lost my mom, he said slowly, there were people who could have helped. They didn't. Lena held her breath. I don't judge them, he added. Everyone has their limits. He looked at her then. But I promised myself I wouldn't be that person. Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. I don't want to need you, she whispered. I know, Caleb said. Needing someone is terrifying. She let out a broken laugh. Then why does it feel like we already do? Caleb didn't deny it. Before either of them could say more, a small voice drifted down the hallway. Mom. They both froze. Ivy stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled, eyes sleepy. My leg hurts, she said softly. Lena moved instantly, kneeling in front of her. I'm here, baby. Caleb hovered uncertain. Ivy glanced at him. Can you stay too? She asked. The question hit both adults like a quiet explosion. Lena looked up at Caleb, fear and hope colliding in her eyes. Caleb didn't hesitate. I'm here, he said. Both of you. Ivy relaxed immediately, leaning against her mother, her pain easing as the tension drained from the room. Later, after Ivy was asleep again, Lena and Caleb sat in silence on opposite ends of the couch. I don't know where this is going, Lena said. Neither do I, Caleb replied. She glanced at him. But you're still here. Yes, he said simply. That night, long after Caleb left, Lena lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, her fear wasn't just of losing someone. It was of letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone was choosing to stay. And that terrified her more than being alone ever had. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, longer afternoons, softer mornings, the kind of sunlight that made people linger just a little longer outside. By then, Ivy's routine had become second nature. Therapy days were marked on the calendar in green. Home exercises were taped to the fridge. Progress was measured in inches, not miles, and everyone had learned to celebrate it that way. On a Tuesday afternoon, Marla watched Ivy finish her stretches and nodded impressed. Okay, she said, clapping once. Let's try something new. Ivy's eyes widened. Knew nothing scary, Marla assured her. Just a short jog, 2 steps, then we stop. Lena's breath caught. Are you sure? Marla smiled. She's ready. Caleb felt his pulse thrum in his ears. He stayed where he was, leaning against the wall, hands folded, pretending to be calm. Ivy stood at one end of the mat, feet planted, shoulders tense. Whenever you're ready, Marla said. Ivy looked at her mother, then at Caleb. Don't fall, she said solemnly. Caleb smiled. I'll catch you. She took a breath, and then she ran. Not far, not fast, just 3 small determined steps, but they were clean, balanced, strong. She stopped, eyes wide, waiting for the pain that usually followed. It didn't come. I did it, she whispered. Lena covered her mouth. I did it, Ivy said again, louder now. Disbelief giving way to joy. Mom. I ran. Marla grinned. You sure did. Caleb felt his eyes burn. He blinked hard, swallowing the lump in his throat. It wasn't the running that undid him. It was the look on Ivy's face, like she'd just been handed a future she didn't know she was allowed to imagine. The winds kept coming, small at first, then a little bigger. Ivy walked to school without stopping. She climbed the front steps without holding the railing. She laughed, more real laughter, the kind that rang through rooms and lingered after. At the next appointment, Dr. Hale studied the scans and leaned back in his chair, impressed. The degeneration has stabilized, he said. Better than that, it's reversing. Lena exhaled a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. So what does that mean? She asked. It means what you're doing is working, he replied, and if you keep at it, she's going to be just fine. Ivy bounced in her seat. Does that mean I can try out for recess soccer? Dr. Hale chuckled. Let's not sprint ahead of ourselves. But soon, yes. Outside the clinic, Ivy actually skipped across the sidewalk. Caleb walked a few steps behind, letting Lena and Ivy have the moment. He watched them like someone observing a miracle he wasn't sure he deserved to witness. Lena turned back suddenly. You did this, she said. Caleb shook his head. She did. She couldn't have, Lena replied softly, without you. He didn't argue. The change wasn't just physical. Ivy began to bloom in ways no one had anticipated. She talked more, asked questions, made plans. She taped a drawing to the fridge one evening, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that took up half the page. That's us, she announced. Caleb smiled. Who's the tall one? She pointed at him. You. Lena froze. Ivy glanced between them, suddenly uncertain. Is that okay? Caleb met Lena's eyes. He didn't answer right away. Lena nodded once. That's okay, she said. Ivy grinned and skipped away. Later that night, Lena found Caleb on the balcony staring out at the parking lot, hands resting on the railing. She's getting attached, Lena said quietly. I know, he replied, and I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. Caleb turned to face her. Neither am I. That honesty settled something between them. The moment came on a Saturday morning. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor, warming the air. Ivy had insisted on going outside just for a little bit to try her new sneakers. They walked to the small park down the street, the one with cracked pavement and rusted swings that still felt magical to a kid. Ivy climbed the steps to the slide without hesitation. Lena held her breath. She slid down, landed on her feet, and laughed. I'm okay, she shouted. Caleb laughed, too surprised by the sound of it. Then Ivy did something neither adult expected. She ran toward the open field. Careful, Lena called. I am, Ivy yelled back. She ran in a wide arc, arms out, hair flying, laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon. Caleb watched, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to intervene. She didn't fall, she didn't slow. She just ran. When she finally stopped breathless and triumphant, she turned and sprinted back, straight toward him. Caleb knelt, instinctively catching her as she collided into his chest. I did it, she cried. He hugged her without thinking, tight, protective, real. And then she said it. Did you see that, Dad? The word hung in the air. Caleb froze. Lena froze. Ivy pulled back slightly, eyes wide with sudden panic. I'm sorry, she rushed. I didn't mean, I just... Caleb took her small face gently in his hands. It's okay, he said softly. Lena's breath hitched. Ivy searched his eyes. It is, he nodded. It is. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on with the fierce certainty only children have. Lena turned away, tears spilling freely now. Later, as Ivy played on the swings, Caleb and Lena sat on the bench, shoulders brushing. I didn't plan for that, Lena whispered. Neither did I, Caleb replied. Does it scare you? She asked. He nodded. Yes, she nodded too. Me too. They sat there, fear and joy intertwined, watching Ivy swing higher than she ever had before. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still came. Work was still exhausting. Some nights Ivy still complained of soreness, but the heaviness lifted. There was room for laughter now, for routines that felt normal, for moments that didn't feel borrowed. Caleb started showing up not just on therapy days but on ordinary ones. dinner nights, homework, help, grocery runs. One evening, as they cooked together, Ivy stood on a chair stirring sauce, humming. "Can I stay here forever?" she asked casually. Lena's heart skipped. Caleb answered before fear could stop him. "As long as you want." Lena looked at him, eyes shining. That night, after Ivy went to bed, Lena finally said the thing she had been circling for weeks. "I don't want this to be temporary anymore," she said. Caleb met her gaze. "Neither do I," she swallowed. "I don't know what forever looks like. Me neither," he replied. "But I know what it feels like." She laughed softly through tears. "I think I am ready to try," she said. Caleb reached for her hand, slow, deliberate, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. At the next checkup, Dr. Hale smiled broadly. "I am comfortable saying this," he said. "Ivy is on track for a full recovery." Lena closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Ivy beamed. "Does that mean I can race Caleb now?" Caleb chuckled. "Careful what you wish for." Outside the clinic, Ivy tugged on his sleeve. "Hey," she said. "Do you want to see how fast I am now?" He nodded. "Show me." She took off, laughter echoing down the sidewalk. Caleb jogged after her slower, letting her win. When she turned back, grinning, she called out again without hesitation this time, "Dad." The word didn't feel heavy anymore, it felt right. As Caleb caught up breathless and smiling, he realized something profound. He hadn't just helped a child heal. He had allowed himself to be claimed by a family he never thought he would have. And for the first time in a very long while, the future didn't feel like something to brace against. It felt like something to run toward. The first thing Caleb noticed was how ordinary the morning felt. No rushing, no pain, no quiet fear hiding in the corners of the day. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen table as Ivy sat cross-legged on her chair. Cereal, forgotten coloring, a picture of a house with a crooked chimney and a yard full of stick-figure flowers. Lena poured coffee and leaned against the counter watching her daughter with a soft smile that had become familiar, one she had not worn in years. Caleb stood in the doorway, keys in hand, waiting. "Ready?" he asked. Ivy looked up, beaming. "For the race." "Always," he said. They stepped outside into a cool, bright morning. The sidewalk was still damp from last night's rain, the air fresh and clean. "On 3, Ivy said seriously. "No cheating." "I wouldn't dare," Caleb replied. She counted 1, 2, 3, and she ran, not carefully, not cautiously, just ran. Caleb followed at an easy pace, letting her win, watching the way her feet moved strong, confident, free. She reached the end of the block and threw her arms in the air. "I won," she shouted. "You always do," Caleb said, laughing. Lena watched from the porch, hand over her mouth, tears slipping freely now. Not from fear this time, but from gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Later that afternoon, they sat together at the small park near their building. Ivy played nearby, chasing bubbles from a wand a stranger had handed her. Caleb and Lena sat on the bench, shoulders touching. "I have been thinking," Lena said quietly. Caleb turned toward her. "I don't want to keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she continued. "I don't want to live like this could disappear at any moment." His heart pounded. "I don't either," he said. She took a breath. "I don't know what kind of family we are supposed to be. I just know this feels like one." Caleb nodded slowly. "I am not perfect," he said. "I don't have all the answers, but if you are asking whether I am staying," he reached for her hand. "I am. Not for now, not until it gets hard, but fully." Lena squeezed his fingers, tears shining in her eyes. "I choose you," she said. Caleb swallowed. "I choose both of you." That evening, as Ivy lay curled between them on the couch, half asleep and warm, she shifted and mumbled something. "What was that, sweetheart?" Lena whispered. Ivy blinked up at them, eyes heavy. "We are a family now," she said simply, as if stating a fact everyone else had finally caught up to. Caleb felt something settle in his chest, quiet, steady, right? "Yes," he said softly, "we are." Months passed. Life stayed imperfect, but it stayed together. Ivy started playing soccer at school. Lena moved into a better job with steady hours. Caleb's place slowly filled with signs of a life shared, drawings on the fridge shoes by the door laughter where silence used to live. One evening, as they cleared dishes after dinner, Ivy tugged on Caleb's sleeve. "Can I keep your last name?" she asked. He crouched to her level. "If that is what you want." She nodded firmly. "It is." Lena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. And just like that, without ceremonies or speeches, a family became official. Years later, they returned to the same bus stop where it had all begun. The bench was still dented, the schedule still peeling. Ivy stood taller now, backpack slung over one shoulder, legs strong beneath her. "Mom," she said with a grin, "do we have enough?" Lena smiled, resting her head against Caleb's shoulder. "Yes," she said. "More than enough." Caleb watched his daughter step onto the bus, steady, confident, whole. He thought about that quiet morning long ago. About a small question asked in a whisper. About how close he'd come to walking away. Sometimes the most important moments don't arrive with thunder. They arrive softly, asking only one thing in return: that you stay. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose and keep choosing every single day. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is not looking away. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of kindness, healing, and the power of staying. Subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories like this, and thank you for being part of our community.